All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Friday, so it's a free-for-all. That means it's your opportunity to call in. And I have not been getting calls this week. I had great guests the first 3 days. Yesterday and today, no guests, just you and me. And I hope somebody or some of you will call in. I am kind of missing one of my regular callers. They haven't called in a while, and I'm not sure if they stopped watching, stopped listening. Maybe I said something that was offensive. I don't really know. No idea. But hey, if you are a caller from the past who hasn't checked in lately, I would love to hear from you. And if you've never called, even more, I'd love to hear from you. 240-242-5646. The show is about a dialogue. It's about trying to come up with solutions to our problems. First of all, agreeing on what those problems are. And secondly, trying to solve them. And I don't think there's a bigger problem, obviously. If you watch my program, nothing is as bad. Nothing needs to be addressed more than the Israeli genocide. And I even talked about it early in this week with Arlen. Does what Israel's doing, Israel's crimes against humanity, do they, to some degree, implicate the very notion of Judaism? Is the religion itself in some way indicted the way Trump is indicting his political enemies? Is there some way that what Israel's doing kind of makes Judaism itself problematic? And I don't believe that, because I don't think that Judaism means you have to support Israel. But many, many, many Jews do. Many, many Jewish leaders do. And to the extent that Jewishness means that Israel is part of your identity, then yes, Israel's crimes, which are fairly imputed, I believe, to pretty much the entire population, because so many support Netanyahu, right? I mean, it's not like this is some tyrant who's taken power against the will of the people, or who's acting contrary to the wishes of the Israelis. The great majority seem to at least support, to a degree, the ethnic cleansing. This is based on polling, the ethnic cleansing that we're seeing. Yeah, to the extent that Jewishness means you are somehow part of Israel. And I Googled this beforehand, by the way. Googled this before the program because I thought I'd heard it. I haven't. But I'm pretty close from the International Holocaust Museum's definition of anti-Semitism. I was looking for the expression, an attack on Israel is an attack on Jews. And they don't quite go that far, but they come close. Now, they do say that you can criticize legitimate criticisms of Israel, like those of other countries, are not necessarily anti-Semitic. But then they go on to say, they use the word criticism to say criticism may not be anti-Semitic, but then they use a different term, I guess attack or military invasion or some sort of, violence against Israel is often anti-Semitic. That's their distinction, is criticism may be okay, violence against Israel is generally anti-Semitic. And, no, it's not. It could be, but it's really about empire. It's about oppression. It's about persecution. And if indeed attacks on Israel, and I couldn't find this right online, this exact expression, but if indeed attack, as I believe many Jewish leaders will insist, and many non-Jewish leaders, just Jews will insist, any attack on Israel is an attack on all Jews. To the extent that's true, then that means that Israel acts on behalf of Jews, right? Because if an attack on Israel is an attack on Jews, then Israel must be equivalent to Jews. Now, I don't believe it is. I'm Jewish. I do not renounce my religion. I renounce Israel. I don't renounce my religion. But if indeed an attack on Israel is an attack on all Jews, then Israel is Jews. And therefore, what Israel's doing reflects on Jews. And therefore, genocide is a Jewish crime, not just an Israeli. Now, I don't believe that. Of course not. I didn't do it. I didn't commit it. But if you're going to say we embrace Israel, that's part of our heritage, then I don't know how you can distance yourself, how you can say, okay, well, I embrace Israel, and when you attack Israel, you attack me, but then say, but what Israel's doing isn't me. I don't see that. I don't see that. If Israel's committing violent crimes and you're tying yourself to Israel, saying your identity is wrapped up in Israel, then how are you not also committing violent crimes? I don't see that. 47 Palestinians killed in Gaza past 24 hours amid ongoing Israeli genocide. That's the Wafa news service. That's the Palestinian news service. And again, we're seeing a terrible numbers of dead continuing to rise. Although what I do find somewhat counterintuitive, as bad as these numbers are, and they're terrible, they're not as bad as they were even a couple of weeks ago, when rather than occupying with its military, basically going door to door, the Israeli army was basically just bombing. The occupying forces were bombing, and sniper attacks, right, were being launched against them. And maybe part of this is the Israeli army is less bloody. One of the main factors in the high, very high, even higher than previous death counts in the past few months was the GHF, right, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which was where it was like a honey pot for the Palestinians, where they would be attracted by the prospect of getting food, and some would get food. Some starving people would be fed, and others would be shot. Sometimes the same people who were given food would also be shot at. So that was a source of a very significant number of fatalities and even more injuries. Now, maybe because the army's there, it's distributing food to a degree that the GHF is not. I don't know all the facts. Obviously, 47 more dead is horrific. The death count now over 65,500, official from the health ministry, and we know it's much, much higher. Netanyahu and Trump getting close to 13K. So that's just sort of a thumbnail sketch of how bad things are in Israel, by Israel, how bad things are around Israel as a result of Israel's actions. And I would say in Israel too, because I wouldn't want to live in a genocidal state. I get that they're committing crimes outside of Israel to a greater degree, but this is not a free country. This is not a democracy. And even Jewish people cannot speak out without fear of reprisal. So it's a very scary place. It's a not quite totalitarian, but it's a military state. And our full, unblemished support, right? There's no distance, right, between Israel and the United States under Trump. That is a big reason we need to go in a different direction. We need somebody else to be our leader. That was a big reason we need someone else to be our leader than Joe Biden, someone else to be our leader than Kamala Harris, because they weren't prepared in any way to distance the United States from Israel. They were not prepared in any meaningful way to stop the genocide. And for that reason, they shouldn't have been leading our nation. Well, that same reason, of course, applies to Trump. And there are many other reasons that Trump should not be president. Hopefully the Democrats, and I say hopefully because I'm not seeing the evidence that this is happening. Hopefully Democratic leadership will give us a better option than what they have been giving us in the past. Hopefully. We'll see if that happens. I'm not overly optimistic. But make no mistake, this shows criticism, harsh criticism of Democrats should never be taken as some kind of an endorsement or tacit approval of Trump. What it should be taken as is some understanding of why there were many who voted for Trump, because the alternative was as or almost as bad. Because the Democrats, now, again, I say you should have voted for Jill Stein. I don't excuse you for not. But if the choice is between, if you view yourself as choosing between Harris and Trump, then it's hard for me to condemn either choice. What I do condemn is the perception that there wasn't an alternative, or that one of those two wasn't really bad, because they both were really bad. All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Would love to talk to you. The murderous rampage that we support in Gaza is certainly, in my view, the biggest reason not to even consider Trump as possibly an acceptable leader, why we absolutely must go in a different direction. I think the number two biggest reason is the extraordinarily cruel treatment of immigrants, whether here legally or not. It's wrong, it's evil, it's immoral. But what we're seeing now, going after political enemies like James Comey, that's really scary too. That's fascism, no question about it. Overriding the recommendations of career prosecutors who say, no, you don't have a case. That's bad stuff here. And I get why Trump is mad at Comey. I really do, because when Comey was in charge of the FBI, he did preside over a witch hunt. It was based on false information that the Clinton campaign provided to distract us from its failed policies, failed campaign in 2016. And the solution that the Clinton handlers came up with, the Neera Tandons and the Center for American Progress people, their solution was, let's say the Russians and Trump conspire to defeat me. And that was bogus. It wasn't true. Comey took that claim seriously, presumably, and he went after Trump. Now, he has a right to conduct investigations. He was the head of the FBI at the time. He has the right to conduct them, and he did. And, it ultimately didn't come up with anything prosecutable. The decision was made by the independent prosecutor, Walsh. I believe it was Walsh, right? Not to prosecute. But Trump's salty about that. He's mad. He's angry. He's mad that he got prosecuted for, it was a civil prosecution charged with sexual assault and rape based on based on events that apparently, supposedly transpired over 20 years ago. So he's mad about that. I'd be mad too. Statute of limitations was changed in New York State basically so that he could be charged. Well, I would be mad about that too. I would be mad about, a person being able to recover several $100 million against me without even identifying the date when I allegedly sexually assaulted her. Now, that said, he may well have sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll. I don't doubt that that's possible, but there's reasons for statutes of limitations, so you can defend yourself. You don't have it for murder because, well, for one thing, the complaining witness is dead. And we believe that if you kill somebody, then you should never be able to escape punishment for that until you're dead. But that isn't the case for other crimes. For other crimes, we say, well, prosecutors can't just charge you with something. Also, because when it's a murder charge, usually there's a body, right? You can prove at least somebody was killed. There's a body you find it 20 years later with a bullet in it, or some kind of DNA evidence ties the defendant to a victim. New witnesses, there's all sorts of potential reasons why you would allow a murder prosecution to occur even 30, 40, 50 years after the crime was committed. It's different with a sexual assault, where you have a victim who presumably can speak, who can testify, who can go to the police, and then doesn't do that, and then suddenly 20 years later does. That's problematic in my book. Doesn't mean Trump didn't commit the crime. It means that he's going to be legitimately, really, really angry that he was sued for it. He's going to be angry that he was charged with conspire. At least there was a years-long investigation to whether he committed some sort of conspiracy. He was engaged in a conspiracy with Putin when he wasn't. So those things are going to tick you off. And I get why you would be looking for payback. But dude, you're the president. Just get over it, for crying out loud. Going out on a witch hunt, trying to come up with something when your own Justice Department says, no, I got nothing. We got nothing here against Comey. And we'll get into the charges. So you could say, well, how could it be nothing? There was an indictment. The grand jury did find there were 2 legit counts against Comey. And I only saw one really described. I guess there were 2 statements he made to Congress that could arguably be have been dishonest. My son made a good point. Well, if he was before the Senate and there was some sort of perjury going on, then why isn't the Senate prosecuting him? And I think that's a really, really good question. I don't know. I think that would generally have been certainly the standard, is if you lie to a particular body, then they're the ones who would conduct the prosecution, or at least the body would refer it for prosecution. If a judge believes that a witness committed perjury, I know this from having, tried cases. If a judge believes a witness committed perjury, then they'll refer the matter to a prosecutor to investigate. Did the Senate refer Comey to the Justice Department? I'm not aware of that. It sure seems like this is, I don't think there can even be any doubt. This is a show trial. This is designed by Trump to get back at political enemies, people he doesn't like. That's not democracy. That's not freedom. That's not justice. This is why we need to defeat Trump and, directly his Congress next year. Will Democrats take that challenge on? Will they be serious in wanting to defeat Trumpism by pushing truly pro-people, pro-worker policies and candidates? I'd say the evidence is very much against it. Zohran Mamdani would be a perfect example of that. There seems to be zero self-awareness, or at least I don't even think it's zero self-awareness. I don't know if Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer know or care how reviled they are, how much their policies are despised. They do know that they're getting millions and millions of dollars in campaign contributions. They know they have golden parachutes. They know that their future is incredibly secure. And that's what they obviously care about. Because if they cared about defeating Trump, then they would adopt pro-worker, pro-environment, pro-peace policies, which they don't do. Grand jury indicts longtime Trump target, former FBI Director James Comey. The move come. And look, I'm no Comey ally. I don't have any great. I already told you I don't like the way Comey Comey's investigation of Trump. I thought that was a witch hunt. I thought, Comey's letter to Congress where he concluded that Hillary Clinton's server was wrong, but isn't that what he did? Something about how, or was that letter about something to Weiner? Right? There was some guy named Weiner who was apparently, I guess, one of Hillary's best friends, had Hillary emails on his laptop. So was that a problem? The husband of one of her best friends, who turned out to be a sleazeball. It wasn't Tandon, it was Huma, right? Huma Abedin's husband. I don't even remember. It's been 8 years, 9 years, whatever that letter was. It clearly hurt Clinton. It was sent in October of 2016. And it was probably true what he wrote. I mean, I had been saying for nearly a year that Hillary violated federal guidelines, federal rules, published regulations with respect to her email server. It was wrong what she did. And it was even worse that she didn't come clean and acknowledge that she violated the federal regulations. But all that said, the letter that he sent was clearly injecting himself into the politics of the whole situation. And it was, the timing was off. We already knew what was going on. It basically allowed the right-wing media to run with it, and it hurt her. It did. Now, I don't really care, particularly at that time. Yes, had discovered emails potentially pertinent. So there were more emails, I guess is what they said. In 11 days before the election, he sent a letter to congressional leaders notifying that the Bureau had discovered emails potentially pertinent to his previously closed investigation. It was all part in the same ball of wax. We already knew she violated the rules. She wasn't gonna get locked up for it. I don't think she could have been. I don't think those rules provided for criminal prosecution. But she showed terrible judgment. But he just re-injected that into the race at the worst time, and he shouldn't have. Just that simple. So I have a problem with Comey, a lot of problems with Comey. He shouldn't be prosecuted. This is clearly political payback. It's wrong. And it's Trump at his worst. Vindictive, mean-spirited, reactive. This is the last person who should be running this country, who should be the most powerful person by a lot in the world. So, no, guy's a disaster. The bare bones 2-page indictment was signed only by Lindsay Halligan, a former defense lawyer. So she's not a prosecutor. She's a defense lawyer. She's not, I'm not saying defense lawyers can't be prosecutors and vice versa, but you're talking about a really, really important high-profile prosecution of a former FBI director. And the best you can come up with is like a wet behind the ears prosecutor who's your close personal friend, who you personally, Trump, paid a ton of money in legal fees to? No, this doesn't pass any test. She had personally presented a case to the jury. That's the grand jury that did choose to indict. Now remember, the joke about the grand jury is they would indict a ham sandwich. And it's kind of true, because all the grand jury is tasked with determining is if the facts alleged, not proven, if the facts alleged by the prosecutor are deemed to be true and all inferences are deemed to be correct that the prosecutor draws from those facts, could a jury convict? Not would they, could they convict reasonably the defendant? And that's an incredibly low bar. The reason you have that super low bar is because prosecutors have an ethical duty only to bring cases that they believe they can win before a jury, that they can win when they present it in court. So the prosecutor says, well, we're going to get more evidence. We don't want to present everything to the grand jury. We don't want to give the defense counsel a roadmap to defeating us in a jury trial. But we're confident we have the evidence. We have statements we're not going to put before the grand jury. We have witnesses that we're not going to present to the grand jury. Now, at some point, we'll have to let the defense know about them, but we're not going to do that yet. But we'll give enough to the grand jury so they can conclude that, yes, we could win in court. But even here, only one charge. I said two. One charge. Halligan tried to get two charges, indictments on two charges, and the jury said, "Now we'll give you this one." So, by all accounts, a super, super weak case. Now, I want to say one other point. Look, Trump's the president. I don't necessarily fault him for being an aggressive champion of his agenda, right? If Bernie Sanders were the president in 2017. Heck, if Zoran Mamdani is the president, if Jill Stein was the president now, as I wish she were, I would want her to push the boundaries of what's considered acceptable in support of a pro-worker, pro-peace, pro-environment agenda. I would want that. So a big reason I'm faulting Trump isn't just because he's being aggressive in promoting his agenda. It's that his agenda is terrible. It's vengeful. It's anti-democratic with a small d. This is why he shouldn't be president. Actually, it's not just about process, although he is abusing the process, absolutely. But he's abusing the process to send a message to anyone who would ever stand up to him or say no to him or challenge him or call him out. That's awful. I want people who push the envelope against the billionaires, who push the envelope to take our military's budget way down and to reduce our environmental footprint. That's what I want my leaders to do. Obviously, Trump's going in the opposite direction. All right, so the New York Times, obviously, they're not completely unbiased. They're often just the opposite. By the way, a couple of things, 240-242-5646. Don't forget, 240-242-5646. I would love to talk to you. I'm also going to urge you, yes, please, please, please subscribe now if you haven't yet done so. Click that bell. I haven't been telling you to do that as much as I should, but it really, really helps if you subscribe. The more subscriptions, the better. Heck, I could even start getting a little bit of money out of doing this. 240-242-5646. If you want to join me, don't forget, click like. And any commentary is also super welcome. Would love you to comment on Facebook. That's one other way you can interact with our program. Contact us on Facebook. Yeah, 240-242-5646. Let me see if I've got any commentary in here. I'm going to have to mute that. I've got a little bit of a little audio issue there, which I'm not quite sure why it's doing that, but we did mute it successfully. There we go. We got that muted down, and we got this muted as well. So yeah, Facebook. We got that Facebook thing blinking there for quite a while. Definitely join us, and let's see if we've got any commentary. You're not seeing it. Okay, just was going to respond if you are commenting on YouTube. Here's the charging document description in your New York Times. So again, we're talking about why we have to do what we can to stop Trump. Because he's vindictive. He's mean-spirited. He goes after political enemies. He's bending the law, if not breaking it, to charge people. This is what they're claiming with the potential of 5 years in jail for Comey. He falsely claimed back in, I think it was 2021, during a hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee that he had not. So I had to read this about 8 times to even understand this. The Senate Judiciary Committee asked him if he had authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports regarding an investigation into person one. So this isn't even regarding Trump. They're just looking for anything they can possibly maybe hang on him. So did you authorize another FBI representative to serve as an anonymous source? And I guess that's relevant because, well, if you did, what were they going to tell the media? Like, were you trying to push a narrative? The Senate Judiciary Committee might want to know that. I don't know that there's any crime committed. I don't think they were saying that. But he said, no, I didn't. We had no anonymous sources. We just told them what we had. And then the indictment says that was a false statement. He had, in fact, authorized person 3 to be an anonymous source. It seems like such small beer, doesn't it? Why is this even important? Whether Comey did or didn't tell someone they could or should serve as a mouthpiece for the FBI without identifying themselves, right? I guess the FBI, normally you can't be an anonymous source. You work for the FBI, you have to identify yourself and you have to speak on the record for the agency, right? But we don't want, presumably, I don't want government agencies leaking sensitive information. designed, again, like, to embarrass political enemies. Although in this case, the investigation wasn't even into Trump. It was apparently into Clinton. All right. So that's a fair question to ask. Did he say you can be an anonymous source? You have to be an anonymous source. How do they know it was false? Comey continues to deny it. Do they have a witness? No one is identified in the indictment as the anonymous source who says, yeah, Comey did say I should be an anonymous source. I could be an anonymous source. He did say that. And, and then we know Comey said to the Judiciary Committee, because we have the transcript, that there was no anonymous source. So then at least you'd have some proof. But that's not presented. What we do have is a couple people that they followed up with, and that's about it. So according to the Times, and I, by the way, I believe this. I don't always believe everything the New York Times tells me. There's plenty I don't believe. But this just seems, again, like such a nothing case. Career prosecutors who looked at the evidence against Comey thought that it was far too weak to justify an indictment. And in fact, people resigned. They said, this is BS. We're resigning. The key exchange was brief. In other words, who knows? Maybe Comey didn't even know what the question was about. For another, it referred to testimony from 3 years earlier. So when he was before the Senate Judiciary Committee, he was talking about what had happened in 2017. He was before the Judiciary Committee in 2020. I think it was, because it's a 5-year statute. So 5-year statute on perjury to Congress. He was talking 2020. He was talking about 2017. Who knows? He could have been talking about some other, there could have been confusion over which particular case Comey did or did not authorize an anonymous source. It's just ridiculous, honestly. And again, because so many, including conservative prosecutors, just said, we're not going to do this. Even Pam Bondi didn't want to do it. The vague description of authorizing someone at FBI to share information could also apply to a different episode. Exactly. They mentioned some guy named Daniel Richman. It just seems so clearly a pretext to go after a political enemy. And we know it's Trump behind it because he was on Truth Social going after Pam Bondi and telling her, he didn't hide it. Got to give him credit for that. He's real clear. He's not a lawyer. Trump ain't no lawyer, but this is a great case, and many lawyers and legal pundits say so. Actually, the only one who apparently even agreed to bring it was Lindsey Halligan. All the others said, no, it's not. So it's just BS. And look, even Comey, Schiff, Letitia. Schiff's not my favorite, of course, but again, where's the beef? It's purely, it's a political partisan motivated hunt to, it's Trump's enemies list. And that's fascism. You're weaponizing the Justice Department to punish people that you disagree with politically. Now, if someone said to me, well, that's what Democrats did, that's what that charge against Trump was in New York, I'd be like, yeah, it was bad. And if you want to go after Cyrus Vance, I think he was the one who at first green-lighted that, I'd be like, yeah, go ahead. You should. Those were bad things too. But this is really at a different level. It is the president. He's, quote, won. He's in office. This is what he does. We need something different. We need the Democrats to fight back. We need them to present an alternative to this corrupt caucusocracy, kleptocracy, call it what you like. I talked a lot about this because I want to make it real clear why I believe it's a bogus. It's just wrong what Trump's doing, just flat. I'm sure lots of people see that too, but I want to be clear about it. But, again, to me, you go after James Comey, all right, he's the former FBI director. He's got plenty of friends. He's got plenty of influence. I don't like it. I feel bad for him. I don't feel as bad for him as I feel bad for the people that Trump's thugs, his ICE agents, are kidnapping and disappearing. do we need more reason that we've got to replace this guy or at least defang him by voting out his allies in Congress? The cruelty is just off the charts. Aren't we better than this? Many asylum seekers have been detained, by the Trump administration, by U.S. Customs and Border Protection in unbearable conditions. They're subject to medical neglect, physical and psychological mistreatment, intolerable living conditions, children being detained separately from one or both parents for days or weeks at a time. I get it that MAGA is going to try to defend this. I don't understand why. But you know what? I heard, look, Obama wasn't this bad. He was the great deporter. Obama did some really bad things. And people tried to, there were defenses for him from Democrats. Well, he's not as bad as Bush. Or I don't even know, it's overstated. Would you rather have a Republican in charge? So you hear that. I want to be real clear. This is an indictment of Donald Trump, of his presidency. This is not a defense of anyone else. Do I think this is worse than what we saw under other presidents? Yes. It was worse. It is worse. It is worse. But if we're going to defeat it, we have to promise the Democratic Party there has to be an alternative presented that's clearly better. You can't beat something with nothing. And just wringing your hands and saying, this is really bad, this is the wrong thing, that's not going to do it. We have to have something better. We need arguments that don't just tell us how awful Trump is, but that tell us why the Democratic Party, and I would say the Green Party, that's who I vote for, why they believe what they will do will be better for the American public. So this article doesn't do it. This is from this doesn't do it. The Daily Boulder. This is a disaster. Boulder, Colorado. But MAGA farmers helped create this problem by voting for a clown. U.S. farmers facing Farmageddon as Trump's tariffs wreck ag sector. So there's truth to that. The retaliation by especially Latin American farmers, we're also seeing in Brazil, I guess that's part of Latin America and South America, is really hurting our ag sector. Now, I would argue that from a macro vantage point, this is probably ultimately for the best, because we should have better, we should be helping the South, the global South, develop its agriculture. We shouldn't be wrecking, as we have been for years and years with our, quote, free, unquote, trade policies, wrecking them. But in the short run, it's definitely hurting American farmers, American ag, and Trump should be addressing that, which he isn't. Democrats should be talking about ways that they're going to build a sustainable agriculture sector. They won't, so again, we can point out, the Daily Boulder can point out the specific harm being done to one sector, which, by the way, I don't believe is that large in terms of total employees. But unless you come up with something better, present your case for what you can do better, you're going to lose. So both parties are traitors. Please stop voting for Republicans and Dems. If you go back to voting for either one, you're only going from one hamster wheel to the other hamster wheel to nowhere. Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, but I'm also looking at a pretty scary administration right now that's really taking us to a darker place on balance. I mean, I've been to dark places recently, certainly the torture Abu Ghraib. That was really dark. I think the ramped up security state by Obama, that was dark. Biden's prevention, right? He took affirmative steps to prevent a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. That was really dark. Trump seems to be actually taking us to going even further. Now, again, I'm not going to vote for bad to stop even worse. So what I'm saying to Democrats is, if you really care about stopping this guy, then you got to give us something better than what you have. Just saying how bad Trump isn't good enough. You've got to tell us what you're going to do better. And you've got to say, come clean, say, yeah, we're a big part of the reason you voted for Trump. We didn't give you an alternative that was palatable. They got to do that or they'll lose. Now, this is the wrong way to do it. Joy-Ann Reid, she said some things that are kind of good after she got fired from MSNBC. She's pretty much of a coward, right? Remember, she really took tiny little baby steps criticizing the Biden-Harris pro-genocide policies, but I guess she went a little further than others at MSNBC, and for that she got canned, apparently. But she can't help, as always, flacking for the Democratic Party rather than helping the American public. So she quotes the story this is back in March, but I was just looking for ways, the wrong ways. This isn't going to work. So layoff surge to near record high. Layoffs in March surpassed 20. So yeah, the economy has not been really good, has not been going well under Trump. And now he's going to send $20 billion to Argentina to bail out a failed fascist down there, which is probably going to hasten our continued decline as a country. But here's what Joy-Ann Reid does. She sticks the knife in to the MAGA crowd. Hey, MAGA, is this what you voted for? So this is not helpful. Trying to shame people. It's like, the Hillary Clinton people say, oh, see, Bernie, you cost us the election. You gave us Trump. That kind of nonsense. No. You want to convince people, you want to persuade people, then take responsibility for what you did wrong. Tell us how you'll do better. Joy-Ann Reid should be saying, Democrats, we have got to present an alternative for a better economy than what we have done. Or we'll just keep seeing problems metastasize. But she doesn't do that. She just says, oh, are you happy with yourself, MAGA? But somehow you win. Shaming people, embarrassing people, it pisses them off. It gets their backs up. They say, no, it's your fault. It's not our fault. You can't blame Trump for inheriting a bad economy. Because that's the natural human reaction, to defend yourself, rather than saying, hey, you know what? We think we can do a little better. The American people deserve better than Trump, but they also deserve better than what our people have given them. That's how you win. But you know what? If you don't want to win, or at least you don't want to win with policies that will make things better, then you don't present them. This interview with Rachel Maddow, I think, really points out just what is so wrong with the Democratic Party. I'm just going to play a brief snip, and specifically why they lost, and also what's wrong with the particular candidate that was anointed. People said this. I remember Sean Hannity always would say that Obama was the anointed one, like trying to mock Democrats. Not true at all. There was a Democratic primary, and it was very hotly contested. It wasn't even just Hillary and Obama, as I recall. John Edwards was part of that primary as well, and there were several others. Maybe Dennis Kucinich, or maybe he was 2004, I'm not sure. There were a number of candidates who all ran in 2008 to be the Democratic nominee. There was no anointment. Obama was the preferred candidate by them, if not the majority, by his large plurality in the end of Democratic electors. That wasn't the case in 24. In 24, yes, Harris was anointed by Biden, and she was an awful candidate. And she proves it right here, just how bad a candidate she was.
To say that he couldn't be on the ticket effectively because he was gay is hard to hear.
No, that's not what I said.
So she's there. Maddow's coming on about how Harris said that she would have preferred to have Pete Buttigieg as her vice president, not Tim Walz, which is so really, really strange when you think about it on so many different, and she says that the reason she couldn't pick him is she's a black woman, he's a gay man, it's not going to work. We're asking the American people too much. They can't handle that, right? That's her explanation. The fact that she would think Pete Buttigieg would be a guy who was one office, that elected office was being mayor of a town of, I think, 50,000 people, where he was heavily criticized. He was widely viewed by the black community in that city as, if not racist, a guy who protected racists, who did not put the interests of the poor, struggling, working people of South Bend foremost, who was a gentrifier, who had in a previous life been a McKinsey consultant. So a guy who never championed progressive politics ever, who was not a good Secretary of Transportation. And we know that because there were the supply chain issues that he really didn't ever grapple with. There were issues with, obviously, the railway strike that he had, that ultimately, the Democrats had to lean aggressively on the railway workers and say, no, you're not going to strike, which was a betrayal, by the way, of the working class. So Buttigieg's not a good Secretary of Transportation, a very weak record as a legislator, or as an executive, I should say. And you can bear that with Tim Walz. Tim Walz, also, by the way, Buttigieg, the mayor of a small city in a red state. Compare that with Walz. Walz is the governor of a blue state that Democrats absolutely had to win. Now, you'd say, well, if they can't win Minnesota, they're going to lose. Exactly. He also was the governor of a state that is right against Wisconsin, and that has some similarities demographically. He was a much more appealing candidate just based in terms of his political record. He was more progressive. He actually had a little bit of perhaps pro-Palestine chops, which they could have exploited. Harris couldn't care less about any of that. It's not even in her mind. She says that Buttigieg would have been the right Veep for her, but she doesn't even give us any reason. I'm not aware of any reason, but I'm going to speculate. I mean, she doesn't tell you. But the speculation, of course, is they're on the same page. They're both neocons. They're both pro-war. Remember, he was in the military. They're both neo-libs, free market based. They have no commitment, the way Walz kind of did, to working people. They're both elites with little or no regard for the riffraff. That's why Harris was more comfortable with Pete. That's why she was more comfortable with Liz Cheney. That's why she's more comfortable with Rachel Maddow. There's no pesky working class agenda that she might have to deal with when she talks to them. Well, you're going to lose. That's how you lose elections. That's how you get fewer Black and Latino votes than any Democrat since, I guess, 2004, when John Kerry did very poorly, at least with Latinos against W. All right, 240-242-5646. Yes, I agree. Both parties are traitors. Definitely in California, vote for Butch Ware. So Harris, let's hear her explain why she didn't choose Pete. See if you find this at all an argument for
He
her.
was gay. It's hard to hear.
No. That's not what I said. That he couldn't be on the ticket because he is gay. My point, as I write in the book, is that I was clear that in 107 days, in one of the most hotly contested elections for president of the United States, against someone like Donald Trump, who knows no floor, to be a black woman running for president of the United States and as a vice presidential running mate, a gay man, with the state.
So I'm going to stop it there for a sec. So she's saying no floor. So she's basically saying Trump's going to go after Pete for being gay, right? That there's going to be this like homophobic subtext to the Trump campaign. If you believe that Pete Buttigieg would be the strongest candidate as the vice presidential candidate because of his policies, because he had a strong record, a pro-worker record, a pro-African-American record. If you believe that, then you make that case. And if Trump says, there's some sort of subtext, oh, look at these, whatever, she's got the gays, right? He would say something like that. You know what you do? That you love that. You're like, I'm glad Donald Trump showed his true colors. He can't try to persuade you that our policies aren't better for his people, his voters, right? Mayor Pete, he's for Medicare for all. He wants every single Trump voter to have health care. You say that, you win elections. We're against the endless wars. Pete is a veteran. He served in our U.S. military. He understands the sacrifices that the American soldiers make. And he doesn't believe that we should be making them the way we are right now. We don't need to have soldiers all over the world in hotspots. We don't need to be promoting war with Russia. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be tamping down tensions with Iran, not aggravating them the way Trump did in his first term. You say that, you win. You use your running mate's perceived identity weakness as a strength. You say, this is all he's got. If you believe that Pete's record stands up to scrutiny, but it doesn't. It was a terrible record, and that's why he was a bad choice. The fact that you don't even talk about policy, you don't even set forth one area, Harris, where you believe that Pete would have been a better vice president than Walz, proves you had no business running for president. You didn't. The American public wasn't in your mind, isn't in your heart whatsoever.
Being so high, it made me very sad, but I also realized it would be a real risk.
Well, you lost. So you know that just doesn't fly at all. You say, well, it was a risk because he was a bad choice. Because he has this thin no legislative record, a thin executive record as a mayor of a small city, and a poor record as a cabinet member in the Biden-Harris White House. So that's why he was a bad choice. And the fact that you can't get that, you don't get that, tells us exactly why you shouldn't have been president. You shouldn't have been anointed by the Democratic leadership. Now, we could all go back and say, well, this doesn't matter. Why are we wasting our time? This is ancient history. This is yesterday's newspaper. I agree with it. The problem is people are floating Harris Buttigieg right now. Democratic centrists, moderates, corporatists are floating them as a potential ticket in 2028. This is who presumably Rachel Maddow is presenting as a potential Democratic nominee in 2028. She asks her. Harris doesn't rule it out. We've got to be smart, folks. You run Harris as your nominee, you run Buttigieg as your nominee, you're just ensuring 4 more years of Republican rule. So from Harris, this is the times of Israel. From her book, Maddow doesn't ask her about this, but she does complain that, Biden should have shown some empathy for Gazans, at least show empathy. You don't have to actually feel it, but show it. Present his concern about them, but he couldn't even do that. She acknowledges that. But then she, understanding apparently intuitively that this cold, callous disregard for Israel's victims, the victims of American-Israeli genocide, that attitude that Biden presented was hurting him in the polls and her presumably. You think she would take a different tack? She would change her policy, but she doesn't. She would change the policy. She would say, "I will do things differently. I won't just blindly, without any strings attached, provide weapons to Israel, support Israel under all, no matter what." You think she would get that since she says, hey, at least he should have shown some concern for the victims of genocide. How about instead of showing concern, you actually do something? See, that would seem to me the right tack. You say, I'm going to do something. I'm going to govern differently. I'm going to protect people, not kill them. She never. In fact, what she does, what Harris did, is express, and here it is. This is from her book, as recapitulated in part in Times of Israel via Axios. Harris expresses frustration with pro-Palestinian protesters who disrupted her rallies. She doesn't express frustration with Netanyahu, although she does acknowledge that he wasn't going to change policy. She's upset that they're saying, well, we're not going to vote for you because of her support, not just the Biden's White House, her support for Israel. And my question is, why aren't you frustrated with yourself? Why don't you come back and say, yeah, I screwed that up? The threat to withhold their vote got to me. It felt reckless. The issue was not binary. Well, actually, it really is binary. Israel's committing genocide. You and Biden were helping them do that. You were providing them with the weapons they were using to kill Gazans. That's binary. Either you provide them the weapons or you don't. A or B. Binary. 0 or 1. It's clearly a binary situation. It felt reckless, she writes. The issue was not binary, but the outcome of this election certainly was. So you know what was reckless? You gave them the back of your hand. You know what was reckless? You didn't allow Palestinians to speak at the Dem convention. Now, I would get, you want to say it's a little bit nuanced? It's not binary? Sure. I guess there are ways that you could say, well, we did say we were sorry about what Israel was doing and we would be more careful in the future about whether we would approve arms sales. You could say something like that. I suppose that would kind of make it non-binary because either it's we cut them off, we continue to supply them, or maybe we'll cut them off. But you never said maybe. You never said there was any circumstances where you would even consider ending support for Israel. So for you, it was clearly binary. Either you supported them completely, which you did, or you didn't support them completely, which you did not. You supported them completely. The recklessness was, you're talking about Trump, what a bad president Trump is. He is a bad president, really bad, dangerous. And you know what was reckless? Is that you wouldn't change policy. You wouldn't separate yourself in any way from Trump. I mean, that's clearly a Freudian slip. You wouldn't separate yourself in any way from Biden's horrific policies. And you know why? It's not because of what Jamal Bowman said. Oh, well, I had private conversations and I think she could have been moved. No, you didn't separate yourself from Biden because you agree with Biden. Because you couldn't care less about the Palestinian lives. I mean, if you could have, you would have spoken out about it. And you would have spoken out since the election. If you really and truly believed that you couldn't criticize Israel or risk losing the election by doing so, then why aren't you speaking out now against Israel? Why haven't you taken on Israel now? Why haven't you challenged Israel's leadership now? Seems clear. You don't care. You couldn't care less about the Palestinian people. All right, one more clip. Going after Kamala does feel a little bit old school, old news, right? It really does. But the reason it matters is because she's still being floated as a potential or the most likely Democratic nominee in circles, in powerful circles and influential circles. That can't be. That cannot be. The Democratic Party is completely unwilling to change. And that's why we have Trump. It will only, I shouldn't say completely unwilling to change. It will change for the worse. It will not change for the better. All right, let's play just one more clip here. That again, I sort of am reluctant even because who cares? Right? In the end, who really cares? But I think Brianna Joy Gray makes a good point in this little conversation she has here with Katie Halper. So I'll play it.
Time where Trump has been doing a lot of things that are, he's going after Antifa, the kind of like amorphous, non-defined Antifa. Yeah. Pretty clear that he's on the right, in case anyone missed that, politically speaking. But let's hear what Kamala had to say about him.
A tyrant. We used to compare the strength of our democracy to communist dictators. That's what we're dealing with right now, Don.
So she says, it's so absurd. She calls Trump a communist dictator. It's just beyond absurd. He is working hand in glove with the plutocrats, the billionaires. He has them coming to the White House, eating out of his hand in return for ever more wealth and power. Ellison, now the richest man in the world, his son is going to be taking over the media. That's not communism. In communism, the party owns the media. Now, I understand you can do that horseshoe thing where the edges, they start to look a little bit alike. But in communism, true communism, the state owns everything. That's not what we have here. Not in the least. He's a fascist. And you saw a lot of what Trump's doing, you saw with the Nazis, with the companies like Krups and Braun and what have you, using slave labor to profit. Hitler didn't take on the plutocrats as long as they weren't A, Jewish, and B, were on his side. Well, it's the same exact thing with Trump. He didn't seize Amazon, although, to be fair, the Justice Department just announced a settlement of $2.5 billion where Amazon is going to pay for anti-competitive practices, locking people into their Prime or dishonest, some sort of dishonest sales practices. So actually, that's kind of a good thing. Trump is the opposite of a communist, and yet Harris calls him a communist. That reflects either, real, very sort of frightening level of a lack of understanding of what communism is and what fascism is, a lack of historical understanding, or deliberate misrepresentation of what, of where we are as a country to try to, tag him, Trump, as a communist because you think that's going to make him more unpopular than if you call him a fascist. We know that more and more young people, for example, are embracing socialism, even Republican young people. So why would you think calling him a communist, which he most emphatically is not, would somehow negatively impact on his popularity? Let's play a little more from Brianna Joy Gray and Katie Halper here.
And these titans of industry are not speaking up.
Okay, so we are dealing with Donald Trump, we are dealing with a communist dictator. Did you know that, Brie?
What's that tweet that it's like America is just a country with two right-wing parties calling each other communists?
Well, I just realized, you know why she did that? I just realized when you said that, it's because she's so spineless. Now people are claiming that calling people fascists, right? A lot of Trump defenders and Kirk defenders are claiming that it's violent hate speech to call someone a fascist. So that's why she can't, of course, call him a fascist. So she has to go with like a dictator on the other side of the aisle. So she won't be in the figurative crosshairs of the right or anyone else saying that. And of course,
So I thought that was a really good theory that Katie Halper floated, right? Is that he, over and over, Charlie Kirk was killed because people called him a fascist. Charlie Kirk was killed because Trump is always being called a fascist, not because Charlie Kirk was a hater, right? He fomented hate against trans people, and he was shot by a man who was in love with somebody who was playing a transition. That seems the obvious explanation, right? I mean, maybe that's not the case. Maybe that isn't what happened. Could it have been Israel? I suppose so. They certainly, in my view, had a motive. I believe Israel had a pretty strong motive to kill Charlie Kirk. And I also believe that they have benefited significantly by the death of Charlie Kirk. But that doesn't mean that they did kill Charlie Kirk. It seems to me, I've said this over and over, and I've watched a lot of these YouTube videos, that the most likely explanation remains Tyler Robinson shot him because Kirk spewed hatred towards trans people, and Tyler Robinson was apparently in love, or is in love with a trans person. So that's, or someone who's about to become trans. So that's why. But maybe that's true. You know, Harris thought, we can't call people fascist because that's violence, even though the evidence is very strong that Trump's a fascist. Can't do that. People will get mad at us. So I'll just call him a communist. I like Brie's theory a little better, which is that, she's not a communist. She and Biden were proto-fascists. So she would be the pot calling the kettle black if she called Trump a fascist.
Unuseful Idiots on Monday morning, a couple weeks ago, played a mashup of Donald Trump calling people fascists. It's just such a great example of how they control, that's such a perfect example of how the right frames everything, right? So they say that it's violent speech to call someone a fascist. So now the Democrats are going to respond by, we're just going to instead call bad people communists.
If that's what the thinking is behind that, then that's even dumber than what my presumption was. I just presumed it's the same thing that they always do, which is when they want to say something's bad and vaguely authoritarian, they call it communist, because truth be told, Democrats hate communists more than they do fascists, because fascists don't defend their.
Yeah, that's the answer. I believe exactly. They hate communists more than fascists because Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama are very wealthy. At least the former presidents are. Maybe Schumer and Jeffries aren't that rich, but the former presidents are very wealthy. And vice president, very wealthy. Former first lady are very wealthy. And they rub elbows with, they're close to, they're tight with captains of industry. They're warmongers, all of them. So yeah, fascism is far less unappealing to them than communism. So I think she's correct. I think Brie's absolutely correct. Is that what you want? Are those the kind of people you want running your country? I would say no. I would say none of us do, on either end, on either side. Republican, Democrat, either side of that coin. We've got to go in a different direction, folks, unless the Democrats somehow, some way can convince us, and it's going to be a very, very, very tough sell, that they've turned over a new leaf and they're now on the side of workers, on the side of peace, on the side of the environment. With that note, have a great weekend. Thanks so much for being part of Halitics. I will be on Monday with Carlos.